What's up, everybody? So we're back out in the shop with another Shop Talk Tuesday. In this episode, we are not actually working on the Quaking. I'm going to be doing that next week. I had to go ahead and go out of town for like a whole entire week, so it kind of pushed back the schedule a little bit. But what I did want to do was take a little bit of time and, still give y'all a video. And this is something that a lot of people have asked about in several videos, especially over the last few months. They've asked this question, and the question is, how do you come up with your templates? Are you using someone else's templates? Are you creating your own templates? How do you come up with the geometry of them and figuring out what needs to go where and the ergonomics and all that stuff? So what I'm going to do in this video is actually tell you how I come up with things like this right here. Like, I've got a bunch of templates here. I got a bunch of templates over here. So what I'm going to do is just kind of break down the process of me doing a template, or how I come up with my knife profiles. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to jump over to the workbench. We're going to get this thing knocked out. Come on. So there's typically a couple of ways that I come up with my knife profiles. I'll either do it for forging or for stock removal. And for forging, I'll typically take the piece of steel that I'm going to have right here, and I will mark it out on the paper and then figure out from that steel where I could move it in order to be able to make that knife. I typically only make the knife about an inch or so longer than the actual piece of steel, and the whole point behind that is I know that I'm going to be able to pinch certain areas in order to be able to move the steel, or do a distal taper to be able to move the steel out. But you don't want to get too ambitious and try and make an itty bitty piece of steel a big old knife. Work within the steel, work within what you're comfortable with doing distal tapers and how much steel you have to work with. That's going to help you pick designs. So, with that being said, something like this right here, where we just got done doing that quaking, I had taken the piece of steel and I put it down and I figured out, okay, where that steel sits, and then I drew everything around it, and then I went through and tried to figure out where I wanted things like the handle length, the blade length to end up lining up. Easiest way to figure out handle length, take your hand, put it on a piece of paper. So if you look at this, there's my hand right here. That goes right there. So I know whenever I grip this that my hand is going to be just fine in that little area right there. So figured out that, and then that helped me figure out lengthwise, how far I was going to bring out the blade. So it's things like this that you're going to go through and figure out whenever you're trying to figure out all your templates. Now, for me, I have a lot of help because I have a lot of templates that I've drawn out. Now, I did a video a while back showing all these different templates. It's a lot of knives. And I've got a template for pretty much every style of knife. Different types of camp knives, different types of EDCs, and things like that. All kinds of different things that I know fit my hand, so I can base a lot of my designs off of previous knife builds. And I do that very often. So what I'll do, like on the ones that I'm going to forge out, I'll figure out exactly where I want it to be, hand profile, hand size, all that stuff, figure out where those are going to be, and then I will try my best to forge it to profile. Now here's the deal. Don't get so stuck on this profile that you feel like you have to forge it to that, and if you don't, that piece of knife is just a scrap because it came up, about a half an inch or too short or an inch too long. Don't worry about that. This is what your goal is. If you don't get there right off the bat or exactly, it's okay. Go ahead and finish that knife. For me, I like to draw a template so that I know kind of where I want the curves to be. I don't go purely off of dimensions because I'm not a production knife maker. I'm not trying to meet specific production guidelines. I'm making one-offs, or if I do batches, they're very similar, but they're all still unique. So I'm not trying to create some knife that's going to have the same exact scales, fit it no matter how many different knives you put it on. Not doing that. So for me, I'm designing a knife that I think looks cool and is comfortable and will work well. Now for this particular video, I'm going to show y'all how I would actually draw out a knife profile. So let's say we wanted to do something like an EDC that fit a specific steel bar, like if we were going to do a stock removal, because y'all saw what I would kind of adjust on a forged profile. Well, let's say we have something like this right here. This is some 26 C3. I've made chef's knives with this. I've made camp knives with this. We're going to do some stock removal on it. So easiest thing to do with this, come in, draw out a little bit of a length and of the bar here. And we know that we're going to end up doing just a little EDC or something like that. By little EDC, this is still going to be a big knife. I mean, you're looking at a 10-inch long knife there. So it's not exactly a small pocket knife. But for this, I would go through and figure out where exactly I wanted the handle to be and where I wanted the blade to be. Now, of course, you can forge and do all that stuff, but a lot of the people who are starting the knife making process are not trying to figure out how to do the forge to profile thing. If you're watching my videos, typically you're not at that forge to profile, forge to finish phase. You're at that still getting into the knife making world, and you're trying to figure out how to kind of do this all yourself. So this is why I'm trying to show you it this way. And don't be afraid to do a stock removal knife. It's okay. You're allowed to do it. So what I'll do typically on something like this is I'll try and figure out, okay, out of my previous profiles, what has a nice simple EDC handle shape? And I'll take something like this right here. This is one of my favorite EDCs that I carry. I know it fits my hand well. It's got a good little profile. So that would be a great little knife. But I don't want to remake this knife. So what I am going to do is take a little bit of the handle dimensions off of here and kind of run with that. So we would draw out the handle on here. So now we have the handle drawn out. Make that a little darker. So now we have a handle drawn out. And at this point, I can pretty much design my blade directly off of that, because I know that this handle is the actual size for a regular sized person's hand. My hand's like in that medium to large size. So it's not a small hand, but it ain't massive. I don't got bear paws. So with this, I know, okay, that handle profile will work. But maybe I want the overall arc of the blade to be a little bit different than what's on this. This has more of a straight profile coming across here. Yes, it does have a little bit of a curve to it, but it's a little bit of a straight profile. So I'll go, okay, I like the way this is looking, but I want to drop the back of the handle down just a little bit. So then I'll just come in and I will arc the spine down, okay, of that tang, bring that spine down, and then I will base the rest of the handle off of the spine. It's a lot easier to do that than change the profile of the handle and make the spine fit it. So we bring our spine down. We know that we had this much length going on here, so now we need to drop the back of this down a little bit more. So we would come down to here. Well, if we drop it down and forward, It's going to make this overall length where the finger choil comes in, and it's going to bring it close together, and it's going to pinch your fingers. So if we're going to drop this down, we need to bring this back just a hair so that it compensates for that. So if we're going to drop that down, we can bring it back and then keep that same curve that we had originally with it. But of course, we're going to drop everything down just a hair and then pull it back up into that little area. So all we're doing is tapering it back into the original profile, because we didn't move this height, we just moved this height. So the finger choil is going to be in the same exact location. So we can bring this back, modify it just a little bit to where we still have a nice profile. And I'll go through and I'll redraw handles multiple times in the process of trying to figure this out. Don't erase your lines. Don't erase the existing lines until you're done figuring out exactly where that profile is going to go. Whenever you're done modifying a profile, then erase the lines, because you still want to know where the original lines were. So we've got our handle drawn out right here, roughly. So then we can go through and figure out where I want my blade to come. Do I want my, my finger choil? Do I want it to, the ricasso area and everything to drop down really far on the blade? Do I want it to be a little bit higher? How tall do I want my blade to start off with? For me on this one, I want the blade to be a little bit taller. We're going to do let's do a drop point. Something that has a pretty classic shape, but still pretty beefy. So we're going to do a drop point, which means we're going to bring this arc coming from this spine all the way forward. And we're going to drop it down. Just like so. So we're going to drop that drop point down. Now the cool thing about a drop point is you can kind of have this tip wherever you want. The issue is you don't want it to look like a chef's knife. Like right now, I could bring this down like this and bring it forward just like this, and boom, you pretty much have a chef's knife blade on there. Well, we don't want that. We want it to still be a little bit unique. So for this right here, I'm looking at it. In order to keep the profile that I want, I'm going to bring this spine up just a little bit going into that blade. Like I said, don't start erasing lines. So we're going to bring that up a little bit, and then we're going to pull this back, and we're going to leave it to where it has a nice point to it. We're just going to rotate it back to the handle, or not to the handle, but the ricasso area here, where a sharpening choil is going to be. So what we did here was made it to where it has a nice gradual flow. It's almost like a spear, but this is still a little bit flatter, and this is more a little bit curved, as opposed to a chef's knife, which would dip down and then have a nice flat area for chopping, and then a rock area for being able to do all your chef stuff. This is just a gradual flow back to here. And then we can start figuring out, okay, where's my handle gonna go? Where my plunge line's gonna go? How do I want that stuff? So at this point, we've got our knife profile that we want. Now we'll take and we'll erase all the previous stuff. And we'll get our final, for the most part, profile, some of y'all are going, how the heck are you EDCing a big old camp knife like that? I EDC all kinds of different knives. And most of the time whenever I'm carrying a knife that's going to be like this, it's going to be something I'm going to carry with my pack or something like that, or with my go bag. If you don't know what a go bag is, look up a go bag. I'll carry something like this and call it good. Every time I go on a car trip, or if I'm going to leave my town or something like that, I'll always have one of my knives like this with me. So we got our knife profile. Now we can go through, figure out roughly where we want our handle, where we want our plunge line, and how far we want our bevels to come up. On a knife like this, because of how big it is, I of course would not do a Scandi grind. Typically on a knife this size, I'm going to be using something that is like close to, maybe this is about the thinnest stock that I would use right there, like 3/16 or something like that. But typically I use something just under 1/4 of an inch, which y'all are gonna think again that's super beefy, but I'll typically taper the tang, taper the blade, and the only area that's that wide is this little area right here, because it tapers all the way through to the tang to be thinner, all the way through to the tip to be thinner, so that the mass is all in the center of the knife, which makes the weight real nice. But you know, you don't have to go that thick. You can go smaller than that or thinner than that. Anyways, so we're gonna have the handle. I know that I'm gonna want it to come just in front of where the finger choil is. So I'm gonna want my handle to come just in front of here. And let's arc it back like that. So you'll see some knife makers who will bring their handle material all the way down in front of their, you know, right in front of that finger choil area. They'll bring that handle all the way down, which it's kind of overkill on the material use. You don't need to do that. Your hand, you should be able to smooth this area enough to where it feels comfortable if you have to plunge that knife into something, which is again the reason why typically the thickest area of my knife is this area here. You know, that's going to be the thickest. Where your finger's coming up to on this is typically going to be the thickest area. Anyways, you don't need to put handle material all the way down here. You don't need to do a second finger choil for people to choke up on in this area right here. Just do your handle, let your blade be the full length of this area. Don't try and sacrifice it, you know, cutting edge for some designs and style right here. Unless that's your flair, do your thing. So we got our handle profile here. Now we can go ahead and figure out, okay, where do we want our blade to be? So on something like this, I would typically do a sharpening choil. So you're gonna have your sharpening choil, however you wanna do it, whether you wanna do a simple little sharpening choil, whether you wanna do what I do and do your R sharpening choil that looks like that right there for rivers. You can do that. So I'm gonna base my sharpening choil off of my plunge, which is then based off of the handle profile here. So where that front of that handle comes in, I know that I'm going to try and match that up a little bit to where this is at. So we're going to come up, and for me, I'm going to make this just shy of a full flat grind. I'm a big fan of angled plunge lines. I don't like the straight up and over plunge lines. I feel like it kind of messes with the flow of a knife. So we're gonna have that. And then on a knife like this, for me, for my stylistic flair, I would probably do the R-shaped sharpening choil. But for the sake of this video, we're just gonna do a regular sharpening choil with utilizing something like a chainsaw file or something like a small round file. You know, we don't want the sharpening choil to be too large unless you're trying to do some type of design with it. So now, erase a little bit. And voila, got yourself a knife. Now this would be more like a EDC or a camp or something like that for people who are going to carry big knives. When it's all said and done, the overall length of this knife is 9.5 inches. It's going to have about, with the actual curve and everything in it, about a 5.5 inch from here to here. Well, let's actually try it out. We got a tape measure. We can bend it. 5.5 inch cutting edge, and the handle area in the center here is about 3 3/4, which is just bigger than this one right here. So this one, from this point to here, we're looking at right at about 3.5. So we brought it back just a hair so that my hand can flare out just a little bit more. You know, my fingers are getting fatter. It's kind of how that works. But now it comes back a little bit further towards here. Let's take that hook off a little bit. There we go. So when it boils down to it, it's not that hard to come up with a knife profile once you kind of figure out, you know, curves and things like that. You can get a lot of cool little tools that help you with curves. They have all these little profile things that you can get for drawing. They're like French something or others. Those things, like the French curves, I think is what they're called. They have a whole bunch of different curves that you can follow. But what I like to do is take previous knife profiles, which again, I've got an absolute ton of, and take all these profiles and then utilize them to figure out what I want to do on my next knife. The biggest thing whenever you are making a knife is trying to figure out ergonomics for your handle to make sure it's comfortable, figuring out what type of blade you want, what the knife is going to be used for. The reason why my EDCs tend to be a little bit crazier is because I do things like I work on RVs. So my knives have to be able to do pretty much everything. They need to be able to shave wood. They need to be able to cut through things. They need to be used as pry bars sometimes. They need to be used as all kinds of different things. So my knives tend to be used and abused and put through a lot. I want to be able to baton them through wood. I want to be able to do all kinds of different things. So I utilize my knives for things like that. A lot of people wouldn't, but I make fires in my fire pit often in my backyard, and even though I have hatchets, sometimes I like to baton my knives through wood. It's my knives. I can do whatever I want. But for me, if I'm going to make a well-rounded knife, it needs to be comfortable. It needs to hold an edge. It needs to be a usable blade. And that's how I come up with them. So there you go. Let's pop you back up, do this outro. All right, guys. So here's the deal. I could have easily time-lapsed that whole entire thing and just shown y'all the drawing of it and maybe done a little bit of voiceover or something like that. But I wanted y'all to see the process. I wanted y'all to hear how I think through what I'm doing with the knife profile as I'm drawing it. I wanted y'all to see what I think through whenever I'm doing that. And I figured, you know, even though this is gonna be like a longer video of me just drawing on paper, I wanted y'all to see the thought process and actually see how I would draw out a knife and what I think through with where I'm gonna move the handle a little bit or whatever I'm gonna do to where I'm gonna put the point of the knife or a drop point, things like that, just to kind of give y'all a rough idea. If you like videos of me explaining stuff like this, I can explain other parts of knife making. I can show y'all different versions of knives. If I'm gonna make a kukri, what I think through for that. If I'm gonna make a chef's knife, what I think through for that. If I'm gonna make a tanto or a wakizashi or any of those things, y'all just let me know if y'all like videos like this where I sit down and I explain and then show y'all what I'm doing in the process, which is kind of like what I do whenever I'm forging knives, but that is a little bit more, you know, me talking and just doing a thing. But if y'all like it, let me know, comment section down below. Guys, that is the end of this video. In next week's Shop Talk Tuesday, we are finishing that Quaken. I almost called it Awaken. You know what I mean. So we're gonna be finishing that in that video. Guys, that's the end of this one. If y'all would, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet and you're already here and you just watched me draw a knife. Light. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Y'all have an amazing day. Y'all stay safe out there. I'll catch y'all next time.